You're listening to Changing Reality. Changing Reality, where we bend reality all across the world. Only on WQHS Radio.
So, hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Changing Reality. Welcome one, welcome all to our show. If this is your second, third time, or if you're a returning viewer, thank you for your constant support. And if this is your first time tuning in, where have you been? We've been excited to meet you. But anyway, thank you for joining us on our show. For all of you who don't know, Changing Reality is a show that features phenomenal people from all walks of life who are, in essence, changing their own reality. So through this show, we'll be meeting absolutely brilliant people and interviewing people from social change makers, entrepreneurs, business leaders, executives at the forefront of their industries, in a sense, thought leaders, to even artists, musicians, and inspiring individuals from all across the world who are, in essence, one way or another, creating amazing changes, not just in their lives, but reflecting that around them as well in the work that they do. And it's really important that we have an avenue like this, to me at the very least, simply because through listening to these stories, we can hopefully pick out the nuggets of wisdom that we can use in our own lives as well. And I want to do this show simply because I believe that there are a lot of people out there who do these phenomenal things and make waves in not only their own lives, but those around them. And I'm passionate about learning how they're doing so that all of us can learn to replicate it in small ways in our own lives. So stories have meant the world in my journey. It's helped done so much for me, and I wanted to share that gift of conversation and learning with all of you today. And to show you how much I actually believe in the power of stories and how much it's actually changed my life, I actually founded and run a youth movement back at home in Malaysia called Ascendance, which is where I'm from. And it basically works with not just today our Malaysian Ministry of Education, but over 28 different countries to help provide an alternative education platform for any student who wants to change their reality. So we work with students from elementary all the way up to college through various sessions, activities, experiential learning programs that help them discover their passion, learn about themselves and the world around them, and actually start their own careers while they're still in school. And we've been fortunate to work with over 35,000 students, 970 communities, and have helped countless number of students between the ages of 8 to 20 years old actually start their own social enterprises, their own social impact projects. And the reason we've been able to do all of that has been stories, has been kind individuals who've been willing to take their time to join us, share their experiences, their expertise, the things that they've gone through, so that others may learn from it. And similarly, like that, I hope that this show serves as that same platform for all of you watching today. That from this, you can start charting your own course in life. You can start figuring out what you love doing and use it as a stepping stone to where you want to be. So if there's anything that you want to talk about specifically, any topics, any suggestions, do let us know in the comments below, and we will try to take as many of them as we can to make this show all about you. So today's speaker is someone who truly inspires. I have been extremely inspired seeing the work that she's done, listening to some of her experiences. So I'm very excited for this interview. And she has had the most phenomenal experiences with a career that has spanned all across the world. She has been a leader in everything fascinating and engaging, from leading, from launching satellites to space, from the world of investment banking to big tech. So today we actually have with us the phenomenal, one of the directors of business finance, specifically here in the Asia Pacific at Google. Let's welcome Lavanya to our virtual stage.
Thank you, Harsha. Thrilled to be here.
Well, we really appreciate you joining us. We were just talking before this call that you have a very hectic schedule over the next couple of weeks, right?
Yes, I have. The pandemic is not ended yet, but yes, teams are planning to get together. So I am actually headed to US for 6 weeks, a bunch of offsites and team gatherings and a lot of collaboration in person. So it's going to be a super busy, packed calendar. I can also already see going ahead for the rest of the year. A lot of travel picking up.
I'm very glad to hear that, in a sense, for after being stuck in the same room for 2 years. I think everyone deserves to have a little bit of their offsites, meet up with their team. And honestly, I'm just grateful that you found the time for this. So thank you so much for joining us. And I alluded to this earlier, but you have done so many phenomenal things. You've worked with people, not just in your current role, but throughout your journey across the world, really. In the most fascinating of industries. Satellites was your first stop, and you only got better from there, in a sense. So I guess that's spoiler enough to how amazing it is. But I'm very curious, where did your journey start in a sense? Did you think you'd be doing all of this back when you were a lost, confused college student like us, if you ever were in a way?
Well, not quite. So I didn't know where I was going to be, and I wouldn't have predicted that I'll be in Google today, right? And talking to you today. But back where I grew up, so I grew up in India, and for a lot of women there growing up, your choices was pretty clear if you wanted to have a career and an education for that matter. So it was either you do engineering or you do medicine, right? And I after my high school took exams for both, and it's very very competitive. So you have to get really good grades, and you have to pass the tests. And as is true of many Asian countries, right? Korea, Japan, all very similar in how competitive the high level and the college entrance tests are. So I did that, and then ultimately ended up doing engineering because, again, my father was an engineer and sold me on how great it was, and I was equally split between medicine and engineering. I could have gone either way, but for me the passion was just learning. I love learning, right? And since I really loved learning about different things, I was good at it. So thankfully I got admission into a college in Delhi, the Delhi College of Engineering, and when I finished that, I had a couple of scholarships to go to US to pursue higher studies, and it so happened that I ended up choosing University of Maryland, which is where Goddard Space Flight Center is situated, and hence I got into this realm, marrying my theoretical interest, which was around space systems engineering and distributed computing, which back in early 2000s was still very nascent, and NASA being right there, it was a very good it was a
You were
fantastic
just
opportunity,
there.
yeah, to bring theory into practice, and hence I got into space systems. So oftentimes when people say, "Oh, this is not rocket science," it's kind of funny because I'm one of those who did hold a business card that said, rocket scientist, and seems really long ago now, but yes, so that was my start
Okay.
of this journey.
I'll make sure to never bring up that idiom with you then. It's the actual rocket science scientist sense. No, but that's crazy. Okay, and next time someone tells me that, I'll be like, I actually know a rocket scientist. Okay, thanks for the bragging rights from this episode. Um, but it's very fascinating. And first of all, you have to pick between engineering and medicine. You were just like, what are the two hardest things? Let me pick from that in a sense. And that's how brilliant you are. Oh my gosh, it's so scary to think about. Tell us about kind of like your experience in your masters, I think, in engineering when you at the University of Maryland. Many students nowadays, we at least I think students from where I'm from, we have a tendency to just focus on what we're studying, focus on really absorbing that, and then we think that later we can engage with everything else. But we often miss out maybe some of the opportunities that are right in front of us, or for you right beside you with NASA and all of that. How did you actually, as a student, start engaging with all of these things?
Well, it was a combination of, again, multiple things. I was both a research assistant and a teaching assistant, and I loved research. Was fine, but it was more of being in the lab, working with your professors, growing your network there and knowledge there. But I actually loved being a teaching assistant more, because then I would have all these students come in and ask me questions, and I would engage, and I would see learning as it was happening, what people were finding difficult, what people were finding easy, how do I improve it, how do I help the professors I was working with. And slowly I started engaging myself in realms outside my immediate world too. So I started off actually being a teaching assistant for a professor in the math department, and then in the engineering department, and then I went as far as journalism. So I actually worked in the journalism department, because I realized that things were going to change, right? And I can't say that I knew the disruption that was going to happen in journalism, right? Journalism as we know it today isn't what it was, but back then print media was still the front and center. And the reason I plugged into it was because I realized that the technology journalism used was very very archaic. We were still doing a lot of paper pencil journalism, talking about things, gathering sources, our information gathering process. Everything was, again, this is before the era of Twitter or Snapchat or Instas, and before any of that. But back then you could see something was going to change. Again, Google wasn't there yet on the horizon. We didn't know how online news is going to be, but just engaging in these different aspects and meeting people from all walks of life made me think about the dots ultimately the technology can drive, right? And the strong platform it can be, and the importance of people really learning how to use it effectively, right? And from that point on, I did go on and spend the first 6 7 years in the defense industry. So I was in defense, doing microelectronics, doing things I really loved. And then post 9/11, since I wasn't a US born citizen, so I'm a second generation, citizen, a naturalized citizen as opposed to a natural citizen. There were some of these defense clearances, top secret clearance and whatnot that I could not get, right? And as a result, there were pieces of my project. And again, most of my projects were funded by the Department of Defense or the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, located in Virginia, Arlington. And oftentimes there were these situations where certain important high-level meeting, I just couldn't be there. And that's fair, right? National security reasons, and I respect that. But however, I did feel there was this gap of me doing really good work, but me not being a participant in front of the decision makers or being able to show my work. Oftentimes found myself as the only female engineer in the room. And a combination of both those factors, I said, time for me to try and do something else. And again, in typical fashion, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I found everything interesting. Found myself at the Wharton Business School. Again, a route a lot of people take when they know they want a career change, but they don't know what they want to do. I didn't want to do, hardcore coding or software engineering or development. As I said, I like more the theoretical aspect of it. So I wanted to do something different, something more something where I could see impact and work with a lot of different people, right? So I triple majored, one of I think two people in my entire batch, and I did marketing, strategy, and finance because I said, you know what, all three areas are so interesting. I'm sure I'll know where I want to go, right? And that's how I did my summer in investment banking. Again, data was something I always liked coming from an engineering background. So did my summer in banking and was going to pursue that full time. However, second year of college, I realized that I was pregnant. And I had my husband was a consultant at that point. So his schedule was, Monday to Thursday out traveling, and he would be back home on the weekend. And I said, I decided early on, okay, consulting is not for me. And then finance now, with having to spend weekends in the bank and with the baby on the way, I said, okay, that wasn't how I quite wanted to live either. So I decided, okay, so what are the companies I interviewed with that I really loved, right? And Google was and is an amazing place to be. I remember traveling from East Coast to the West Coast, and that was my first time to San Francisco and to the Google campus. And the first thing I could see were bikes all over the place, these super googly red, green, blue, yellow color bikes, and people are biking between buildings. It was a beautiful, gorgeous fall day. And sunny California. And I was there in my suit, again, coming from a banking background. And I was like, what am I doing? There are people roaming around in shorts and flip-flops and jeans. And I was like, that is me. This is what I want to do. And hence my Google journey started in US.
Okay, you casually went through that story, but you dropped so many bombs on us. First, you triple majored in Ivy League. Then your second choice job was like, you know what? I need a career change. Let me go to Google, which is one of the biggest tech companies. So you see, so there was so many amazing nuances in there. But I think one thing that I want to talk a little bit about was your experiences traveling. In a sense, it's not easy, especially as someone who's probably at least for me, from someone from a different country who's a woman, I don't think I'd be brave enough to travel alone, let alone move around the world, and start moving around in different places according to my career. So when I see that you've actually done that phenomenally in the span of your career, I think that's something that I would hope to learn from. Were you ever nervous and scared, especially in those initial stages, moving to a different country and then finding a space that resonated with you to live in, to work in a sense? Was that something that you just fell into naturally, or did it take an adjustment period?
It did take an adjustment period. This question is often asked, right? What is courage? And oftentimes I say courage is being fearful of something, but being able to overcome the fear. It's not the lack of fear, right? And that's something I always remind myself. I love change. I embrace change, and I go after change because that is something that really excites me, right? New opportunities, new experiences, new people. there's so much to learn from them, and I get so much joy out of fresh interactions. And I think when I was pretty young, and thanks to my family ecosystem, they had instilled this feeling of we are there as a base and a foundation. So anytime you don't like what you're doing or you're afraid, you have roots to go back to. So don't be scared to try out and try different things, travel out and see the world, because ultimately if you don't like where you are, there is home for you somewhere here, whether it was back in the country where they are, or figuratively just the fact that there are people who will respect me and love me for whatever I do, right? Whatever crazy things I do. And I think with that foundation or with that support system, knowing that yes, I have something to fall back on, that has always helped. And then thankfully, and they always say, one of the biggest decisions you're going to marry is the partner you choose, and that is very, very true. Because a lot of what we do is, we need the support of the partner, right? And I've had a pretty supportive partner who's also said, do what you want to do and we'll figure it out, right? But it's not always easy. The first few days or the first few months, there is always this, what do they say? The new start remorse or the new job remorse, where you get in somewhere and you're like, now again, why did I do that? Did I just shoot myself in the foot? Could I not have just continued where I was? So those questions do crop up, but then again, that's very, very natural, right? So seeing that's natural and then moving ahead is important, right? So when I was in US, right, India to US was fine. I had a scholarship that was too good to refuse, right? And it was going to open up a whole new world for me. So I was like, why not, right? Tech to B school was also relatively easy because, again, as you said, who would decline an offer at Wharton, right? It was too good to not do it, right? So I was like, it was a no-brainer. I think one of the decisions I made, which I would say was slightly bold in retrospect, was when I was in US. I knew nothing about Singapore. The only country I knew of was India, and that was home where I grew up and spent the first 18 years of my life. But knew nothing about Singapore. But when I was in US, and I was in Google for about a couple of years, and then I had another kid. So I had two kids under 3, and I was a struggling parent. I was majorly struggling. I just couldn't do it. I was used to having my own time and space and do things when you want to do. And I love reading, and nighttime used to be my reading time. And here I was doing diaper changes and constant diaper changes and constantly feeding. And I was like, what have I gotten myself into? And then I love my work at Google, but at the same time, it does require you to put in your best, right? In terms of time, effort, thinking. And very, very supportive environment. We had a pretty decent mat leave. I had almost 6 months off. So I won't complain about the mat leave, but I would say with the child, even the first 5 years are super hard, right?
I can't believe children are very troublesome. I still bother my mom at 19, so I cannot even. Yeah.
So it didn't come easily to me. So I was at a crossroads where I was thinking maybe this is just not for me. Should I just quit my job and take a break, and then spend some time with the kids, and when they're older, get back to the workforce? Or, I really needed help desperately. And I have both me and my husband had grandparents. Our parents were busy taking care of them, so they couldn't come to help out either. I tried out the nanny route and the au pair, and wasn't seem to be working. So I was wondering what to do. And then I heard about this fantastic ecosystem in Singapore where you can have, live-in nannies who help you with the kids, run the house for you, and you can also work. And I said, okay, let me give it a try, because I was wondering whether I should quit or whether I should try something totally different. And I spoke about this with my manager at that time at Google, and Google is growing, right? And they were growing at that point. They were having offices in all the countries. They were expanding. They were in the expansion phase. So my manager said, if you're thinking of quitting, she would respect that decision. But she said, I would say if you're open to moving to Asia and you want to be closer home, and you want to try a different country, I'll place you in any country you want to go, right? Go and build a finance team there. But are you willing to take that bet? And she was talking to somebody who was super exhausted, managing kids, right? Not knowing what to do. And I was just physically and emotionally tired. And I tell my daughter, who's a teenager, that she cried so much, she almost drove me crazy the first 2 years. So fast forward, I made a call that time saying that I'm going to take a chance. I'm going to come to Singapore, and I moved here with both the kids. And me and my husband decided he will continue in US. We just bought a house, we had a mortgage to pay off, and we said, let's both not disrupt our jobs. I was going to see how it goes, and then depending on how it goes, I was going to make a call of either I return to US after 2 years or something, or he would find a job and move here. Because the idea was not to split the family and not have one of the parents with the kids necessarily, right? So that, I think, in hindsight, when I look at that to me was a pretty courageous move, because country I didn't know anybody in the country I'd never been to. And then I said, okay, let me go try. And I know Google was going to build the base for Asia Pacific out of Singapore. So I said, let me just go try. And I took a leap of faith, took the role here. My 8th year now in Singapore. So I did 3 years in Singapore. After that, I did, 3 years in Malaysia, almost 4 years in Malaysia. And then from Malaysia, I thought I'll go back to US. But again, a fantastic opportunity opened up in Singapore. So I came back again to Singapore. So I think that was a leap of faith that I pride myself on quite a bit. And just seeing the diversity in the region and seeing the growth in the region and what I've been able to contribute to here and build out here, in some sense, I felt I've left a legacy here. Like the Singapore office was about 80 people when I joined. I knew everybody in the cafe. We are now about 3,000 people, right? So it's been an incredible journey here in Asia.
But as someone who lives in Asia Pacific, I think I have to thank you for setting everything up. Like I feel like I'm like one of the top 10 of Google's users in a sense, because I used everything to do with Google. So I have to thank you for setting all of this up and bringing and expanding the work that you do in in Asia Pacific. But but again, that is very courageous, if I may say, because two young kids, probably very much more of a handful, and a whole new country. That is amazing in a sense. And to see how you've actually grown things as one of the senior leaders here today, from 80 to 3,000, definitely shows the work that you've done in Google itself. Tell me a little bit about your journey in Google in a sense. The Google campus is, of course, a beautiful, phenomenal place. But how is it like engaging with what I've heard, some of these extremely bright and intelligent, and from someone who's done a triple major and was a rocket scientist, is probably not as worrying for you than any of us listening in a sense. But how is it like engaging with one of the biggest companies in the world, and then having to come here and set up and grow it in a place that maybe it was not at that time as fleshed out as it was in the US in a way?
So Google, as I said, is and remains a phenomenal company, right? And what really, I think, in my mind, sets Google apart is the culture. It's an amazing culture. It's a very flat culture, and you can do whatever you want to do. A lot of people ask me about 20% projects, because Google had pioneered the 20% project concept, where 1 day a week, or 20% of your time, you can do whatever you want to do, work on any project you find interesting. But I would say this actually carries through to any role or any profile, right? There is a core job most people are hired into, but there's so much flexibility built into it. We tell people, you set your own objectives, go talk to people, see what's needed, right? See where the gaps are, see where the opportunities are, marry it with your skill set, see what you can bring into the team, how can you add value, figure out what you want to do. And if you need resources for that, talk to the managers. We will give you the appropriate resources. Try out different things, right? So this very non-hierarchical, bottoms up, just explore, try doing what you think we should do, convince people, right? Give them an idea, and no idea gets shot down very easily, right? We are always in this experimental, try it out, what's the harm in trying it out, let's see, kind of a culture, right? And again, this is truly as you said, it truly a place of really smart people. So when you're engaging with people, just conversations with them, get your juices flowing, right? Then you're constantly thinking about their ideas, you're building and iterating on each other's ideas, and it's just fantastic. So when I started in Google, this was just post our IPO, and one of the first things I came in to do was set up what are known as budgets in finance, right? What does budgeting means? Basic finance fundamentals on what are the different categories of budget? What should external reporting look like? What is internal reporting? And what role does finance play? And then the businesses just went haywire, right? There was so much growth In businesses, we decided to branch out from traditional ads to YouTube, cloud, some of our big bets. Then we formed this whole alphabet structure of not just Google, but we have self-driving cars, we had internet balloons. So a lot of different businesses, and that's what kept it so interesting. When I talk to some people in Google, we remember back when I started, the marketing budget for Google, right, globally used to be 1/100th of what it is today, right? And that was just US, and we were first thinking about what our marketing allocation framework should be. Now just APAC alone is way beyond what the US and the global budget was 10 years ago, right? And a lot of these businesses didn't exist. So when I was in Malaysia, the role I came back to in Singapore, because at that point I was thinking, 3 4 years in Malaysia, what next? Google then decided to get into the hardware space. We never ever thought we will be a hardware company, right? For us, it was ads, it was software, it was YouTube. Those things have linkages, right? And platform, but to have our own devices and to make and sell our own devices was something we hadn't thought about. So when that whole business came together and they said, can you support it from a finance standpoint? What is the right level of investment? What do we need to do? What deals do we strike with partners? And how do we build a supply chain and a logistics function and manufacturing and distribution and warehousing and something I knew nothing about, right? I felt that I wasn't in Google, but I'm actually in Apple, or think about Samsung, or a leading hardware company, because that's what this branch does, right? So that's been the ride in some sense. So started off in traditional finance, but the role has never been about just finance. I remember back again early in the days, I was supporting the legal team at one point, partnering with that team, and our CFO at that point had said that we have no idea how much legal is spending or what. A big job for finance is to forecast, where is the year going to be? How much are we going to spend? So we can accordingly adjust our investments, right? We want to invest more if we know how much money we are bringing in and we know how much it's going to cost, right? And they said that they have no idea how much the legal team is spending. And that time, one of our biggest cases was actually a company called Viacom that had sued YouTube. So YouTube in its form and shape would not exist today if we had lost that battle, right? Because then we would be held liable for every single video and content posted on YouTube. And we always maintain that we are a platform. You can't hold us liable to every content because we are not a content provider, right? We are more of a platform. But that was a landmark case. And my job was figuring out how much we should spend in fighting that legal case, right? And how long do we think it will take? So a lot of these forecasting things, which again are very interesting, because how do you don't have a precedent for something like that. So a lot of things we do at Google, I feel, has no precedent. So a lot of things is creatively marrying, what I learned in my fundamentals at Wharton, for example, right? What I knew of marketing and what that gets us, right? The whole funnel, and how much do we appropriately invest across the funnel, as well as strategy and finance. It's a beautiful conglomeration of everything I learned that I've used almost day to day now.
So you are the reason we have YouTube as we are.
Again, important thing, Harsha. I am finance. All I do is make business cases with the business and try to get them funded. But the ultimate power is
But
actually
finance is the blood of an organization, right? What keeps things pumping in a way. But you brought up a very unique point. We always talk about these businesses that were not here 5 10 years ago. But that also means like unprecedented change comes with unprecedented problems, unprecedented like roadblocks and all that, and just like that example of like YouTube versus Viacom. It's insane to think that a different outcome would lead to literally a completely different world that we live in today. There will probably be no TikTok or no Reels as we know it with that precedent set in place. And it seems and it's people like you who share the work of crafting the future in a way which is hard for the rest of us to wrap our heads around. How do you in and I'm sure it's not just that one case, I'm sure there's been many instances where you've had to set the precedent for everyone else in a way. How do you go about making these decisions? And again, is there no fear in you when you make these decisions in a sense, or what isn't even is in that process of thought that gets you to be able to figure out what's the right thing to do?
See, ultimately, it is the cause we believe in, right? And for Google, it's always been about making the world's information universally accessible and useful, right? And that mission statement has held true and strong, and it's embedded into our hearts and souls, right? And so these platforms, I think, are very, very useful, because otherwise information will not be accessible. Imagine the tons of people who look up each and everything on YouTube, right? Whether it's how do I cook something, or how do I braid my daughter's hair, or anything and everything, or even, and now it's gone into the medical field, right? People research
Yeah.
on, what a doctor is saying, COVID, and the amount of information on COVID. So all that truly, right, is super, super important. And so I believe in that mission, and hence there's a lot of areas we fought in. That said, talking about the fear part of it, the fear is there, Harsha, but the fear is, are we doing enough? Are we doing all that we can? Because with every upside, there is a bit of a downside that we don't, that they want to make sure we are really conscious of, and we are investing enough in. So if I use something like YouTube or content, for example, the biggest risk is, trust and safety. How do we make sure our information is truly accurate? Right? How do we fight misinformation? How do we make sure that the resources are trusted? If people are looking for something on COVID, how do we make sure that the information we surface is from a trusted source, right? It either links to WHO or CDC, depending on your country or where you are. So that is a big thing, right? How do we make sure there is no fake news? How do we fight against that? So that these risks that you don't anticipate at the beginning, right? Like the fake news could become so prominent, and quite a few unfortunate incidences associated with fake news, or various group chats and where they can take you, are things that, as we acknowledge, we are ensuring that we put the right resources behind that too, on fighting that, on countering that, on making sure algorithmically we can fight that, right? So that is it. So that fear is always there. And technology is definitely for the better, as long as we are all intentionally making the best use of it, right? But there are also downsides that we learn about as we go through it, right? And then are we able to quickly adapt and fix and address those downsides? Is something we spend a lot of time now.
Okay, and that is very inspirational. Whenever I read about all of these cases against fake news, against all of these hiccups, it makes me sometimes wonder that, yeah, and it makes me a little bit grateful actually that we've evolved to a point where we have these issues in a way that we are tackling these things that we would have never have seen. So I'm glad that we have capable people like you on the case in one way or another, making sure that we as I think a generation and as a society using this technology are able to slowly make the right decisions and get into back into the track of or at least continuing in the track of using technology to mitigate these things. So thank you again, like really
Yeah,
appreciate.
even simple things, Harsha. Like one of the features I love best, that's rolling out and is rolled out already, is Android platforms. A lot of our population uses Android, right? On having this timer feature where the phone just automatically shuts off if you've been on a device for more than a certain amount of time, right? Definitely needed, right? Because you get hooked on, right? It can truly, internet can truly become an addiction. So and it's tough to fight, right? So how do you do that? So you have to do that through these intelligent technology features that you can build in. So again, I do think there's a lot of value to technology, but again, you have to build in those features, which now Android has, and I'm so excited about it, because now my daughter can't be on the phone for more than more than an hour, even if she wants. Or all the family features that we've rolled out, right, where all the connected devices, you can see what your kids are doing, YouTube for kids, all those things that are launching, right, and that have launched. So those are all fantastic things. Again, we've learned, it's not like YouTube Kids was the first thing we launched, right? It was YouTube that launched first, but then we learned that yes, we need to have YouTube Kids, and then we launched that. So that
Well, you
is my
serve many parents today who are probably in your position with two kids under three who need something. So you've given back to the community, the parent community at the very least through that. I'm also very curious. You talked about culture earlier, and you also mentioned that you were one of the early pioneers in the Asia Pacific region. From what I've heard and from the very small that I've experienced, culture in different parts of the world can be drastically different in a sense, and sometimes bringing a culture as vibrant and as interesting across the world can be a bit tough in a sense. How do you guys actually make sure that you either find the right people or instill the right culture as Google was growing to where it is today now in the Asia Pacific region in a sense? I mean, with 80 people, you can probably talk to everyone, as you said. When you have 3,000 people, culture is something that is a bit more embedded and less conversational in a sense. So how did you grow with that original vibrant Google culture and not cave into maybe the pressures of the different countries that you're in?
So communication and collaboration is a key Google tenet, right? And Google has always pioneered these concepts of objectives and key results, right? This is how we measure the success of everybody, every individual in their team, in their role. Key component of objective and key result, right? 50% of it, kind of 50% is weighted on what you have done, right? That could be a piece of code you wrote or an analysis you did. But 50% of that, or more than 50%, is how you did it, right? It's how you went about it. Who did you collaborate with? Who did you influence? Who did you teach? Who did you share it with? How did you help somebody else? How did you help new people integrate into the team? How did you help with community efforts? How did you help with diversity, equity, and inclusion? Right? How did you help with trainings? Were you available for coffee chats to meet people when they wanted to meet you? Such a big emphasis is placed on community and people and that aspect of it, that it gets ingrained in your DNA even when people come in, and even when people come in from different cultures, right? The other two big pillars we pay a lot of attention is well-being is a core component of us. So we constantly take the pulse of the teams to see how is your well-being. We do these check-ins, every manager, every team. There are a lot of resources spent on ensuring that people feel happy, productive, and healthy when they are at work, right? As I mentioned, Google was one of the pioneers in really generous maternity leave policies, and that was back in US, right? When it didn't exist, right? 2 weeks or 3 weeks, even now, even yesterday, I met a new neighbor who had a 1-month-old baby, and I was asking her when she was going back, and she said in 2 weeks. So she got a total of 6 weeks off. And in my mind, that's just insane, right? Because Google had 6 months off globally a decade ago, and now it does almost 9 months or something, 9 months to a year. You can take flexible leave. You can come back. There's a ramp up period. There are a lot of things built in. There's a baby bonding leave. A lot of things that are built in to ensure you get quality time when you really need it. And the fact that companies in APAC are still doing 6 weeks is crazy. It's just absolutely crazy. But anyway, that's for a different time. So the people element is fundamental to how we measure your success in your role, right? And every quarter we talk about it. It's built into the expectations we set with each and every person. So I would say that's fundamental. Collaboration, communication, community building, and investing in talent management, not just across your immediate team, but your peers. And then we have a strong mentor network. So all these play a big role in keeping Google's culture still intact.
Very cool. And as we kind of wind down this conversation, I want to talk a little bit about you as an individual. In a sense, you are a parent, you are a top star employee, you are literally an ex-rocket scientist in a sense. That is a lot on your plate, and between moving and between the different exciting things that you do. How do you balance all of that? What's your secret? Because you do so many intelligent things, and including the most hardest job of being a parent, all in one, in a sense. How have you learned to balance that in a sense? No, I'm serious. I think being a parent tops any job in the world in a way. So, how do you? And it's definitely not been an easy journey based on your story. But what do you think was about you, though? What changed that enabled you to embrace all of it and juggle it?
So I would say just a lot of self-awareness, right, on what you need when, and then setting clear boundaries. So there is never a balance. And as I mentioned, I have struggled, right, and I really struggled and gave up, and that's fine too, right. I have really good friends of mine who decided to go the other way. They said they are going to take a break. They took a break in their career. Some of them have come back to really good roles after spending almost 8 years in terms of a career break. Some of them have stayed on the break, and that's fine too. So there are the 2-3 things I generally do tell people, which I tell myself too, right? Success and happiness has to be measured. It's a very personal thing and has to be measured by your own goalpost, right? Some of my a lot of Wharton people are either founders or CFOs or CEOs. Now, I don't look at them and say, oh my God, I'm not there yet. Does that mean I didn't do well enough? No, right? Because that is not what I wanted. And that is not what is right for me today, because there are other priorities in my life right now, right? So always measure success at each point based on, where you are and what's true for you, right? Not what looks good externally. The second thing I tell myself is, be ready to acknowledge if things are not going well. Be ready to acknowledge, like this conversation with my manager that set me off on a good path, right, where I got to enjoy and love, and fall in love with Asia Pacific, right. I get to visit all these fantastic countries and be the champion, right, for Asia Pacific, in terms of Google leadership. That would not have been but for me acknowledging that I'm not able to do it, right. So that's totally fine, and you will find supportive people when you acknowledge it. So don't shy away from those conversations. And thirdly, boundaries. Set boundaries for yourself which are just non-negotiable, right? So for me, I can get so wrapped up in work, which is true and happens for a lot of people. I've set a clear boundary saying, the first half an hour in the morning, whether it's 6 to 6:30 or 6:30 to 7, is for me to work out. Right. And I do this stupid routine of just, gymming at home, not with any equipment, but I have and my sister laughs at me when I tell her I have these 5 kg dumbbells that I use. But I think that's great workout for me. Or I do
That
a
is
small,
great.
yeah,
Every
I do
day?
a small. I'm trying. I mean, on the weekends I do cycling, so it depends. So weekends I have more time, right? So then I do cycling. But then again, it's 6 to 8 in the morning because I'm back. I'm caught between a teenager and a toddler now, so I have a toddler also. And he wants mom, and he gets up. So he's like, "Where's mom?" So I have to be back. I have to be sure I'm home. But set boundaries. So I had a meeting at 5 this morning, and sometimes you do have odd hour meetings because they're mostly with a different country. And this was 5 a.m. in the morning. Today was the only day that worked for both London and that worked for San Francisco, right? And there are these occasions when you need all three of you together to make a collective decision or move things forward. It's not always easy to find a conducive, good time zone. So
Yeah.
sometimes we do make these sacrifices and meet at those odd hours. But anyway, that meeting ended from 5 to 6:30, and then 6:30 to 7:15 was my time where I did the workout that I usually like to do. So at the end of the day, I don't end up feeling frustrated saying, oh, I couldn't do anything for myself, or I didn't save time for myself, or work was overwhelming, right? Same thing. There is this particular period of time, dinner time mostly, that I always carve for being with the kids, right? And no distractions. I'm never on the phone, never on emails. I'm like, and so there's this, half an hour dinner time, and there's this 1 hour of, reading time or sharing time that we do where we talk about what we read in the news, or I talk about, what happened in the day, or they talk about, what happened in their schools. And then we just generally read a book. Each of us is reading our own book, but we are at least together in the same room. Before then, we all depart into our different rooms, right? And that typically happens after dinner. So we have dinner between 7:30 to 8, 8 to 9 is our reading time, and then 9 o'clock we are all off in different places. And 9 o'clock onwards, I decide what I want to do. If I want to work, I work. Many times it's work. Many times it's also catching up something on TV or sleeping or whatever. But I think setting those boundaries, like if these two times in the day didn't exist, then I would feel pretty sad. And I'm not saying it happens every day, because there are travel days and there are days where you have office dinners and things like that when that doesn't happen. But then you make up for it another day, right? Through a holiday or vacation or something. So that's what has kept me going and kind of works for me.
You know what? I think you brought this to a very beautiful close in a way, and a very wholesome, uh, like story. Yeah, I'm sure many of our audience is very envious. You're smart. You have things well planned in a sense. You have a brilliant career. So maybe just to end off,
A
what
very
was
messy house, Harsha. Let me tell you that. Something gotta give.
I
Right?
have a messy house without most of those things. So you're
Anytime I
fine.
entertain, and I can't cook. Like my food is like horrible. You would not want to have even a cup of tea from me. It's that bad. So trust me, it's not all rosy. There's always, something is good, something is going to be bad.
So there's hope for the rest of us. Okay, there's everyone can breathe now. Okay, but no, I really appreciate you sharing. And for anyone who wants to craft a similar path in a sense, who wants to have the family, wants to have the work, wants to do the amazing things that you're doing, where do they start in a way? How do they even go about thinking these questions?
So it depends. It depends what I think. As I said, self-reflection, introspection is key, right? Once you've listed down, what you want to do, why you want to do it, then prioritize. What is totally important for you, that's a non-negotiable, and then make time for the things that you want to do. But a lot of this, as I said, starts from self-reflection and introspection, because it's after all a short life. You want to enjoy it, right? Though people live to 100, I still feel it's too short for everything that's out there to see and enjoy. So I do say, take time to be happy, and don't go by external measures.
All right.
And there are various things. You want to get into technology at the age of 50. Google is now running something called skills ignition program aimed at all levels. I have a friend of mine. So many, there are cases every day. I have a friend of mine who took a career break for almost about 8 years, did some certification courses online, is back at a tech company and she really enjoys the work she's doing. So there are people every single day. I have a colleague who just emailed yesterday saying that she's quitting a job at Google because for 2 years she's renting an RV and her goal is to cover every single state in US. Right, every single state in US, and she wants to make sure she navigates every nook and road and cranny. So she sent this video of the RV that she's just getting designed, so that'll be ready for pickup apparently in a month, and then she's going to start off on this journey. So it's a crazy world now, plenty of opportunity, plenty of things to do. So I think you just need to ask yourself, what is it that you want to do, and once you know that, then the way to do it will appear.
Okay, beautifully wrapped up. And thank you so much for being on this show. I am amazed. I normally have a lot to say, but I'm very speechless by your stories and your examples. And I'm just very grateful to have you here. So thank you so much for joining us. And I do appreciate your time and your thoughts and experiences with us in the audience.
Thank you, Harsha. Thank you. Lovely meeting you. Thanks.
All right. And with that, I guess we'll wrap up our show for today. Thank you to our audience as well for joining us on today's episode of Changing Reality. And if you guys enjoyed today's session, please do let us know below. And till then, we'll see you guys again next Thursday at 10 p.m. as always. Bye.
You're listening to Changing Reality. Changing Reality, where we bend reality all across the world. Only on WQHS Radio.